I'd like to talk a second about left and right hand position on acoustic bass. A couple of very important concepts about, especially the left hand. We often, as we're learning acoustic bass, studying with a teacher or learning on our own, we tend to use a lot of pressure to pull those strings down. Realize that it doesn't actually take that much pressure. If you really think about it, when you're pushing a string down, it's a matter of ounces. It's not pounds of pressure, it's ounces. Find that right amount of pressure to keep the string pushed down against the fingerboard without buzzes. You don't want this buzz, and you don't want the note to sound weak, but there's just the right amount of pressure. Big thing happens for a lot of acoustic bass players. The faster we tend to play, the harder we push that string down. Gotta think the opposite. Start to think light. We can use a light touch on the acoustic bass. In fact, you'll start to discover that the acoustic bass has a really obvious sweet spot. And that sweet spot is often not a very loud playing dynamic. You want to be on your fingertips as much as possible. At first it might feel a little awkward to you because we tend to want to play on the pads of the fingers. Sometimes that's acceptable for certain techniques, such as crossing over and getting a second note on a different string like that. But in general, we want to be on the tips of the fingers. Ultimately, this will give us more speed and more agility on the bass. Make sure the elbow is up. Part of the way to get the hand in the correct position is if your elbow's down, your hand tends to want to kind of curl in like this. And I see this from a lot of players. The hand will curl in. Well, then you don't get the right pressure in the up and down motion on your fingertips. The fingertips are supposed to be like little pistons. So by keeping your elbow out, that allows you to get your fingertips right in the right position for the notes. The other issue that I see a lot is the thumb coming around the side of the bass. No good. Ultimately, this will slow you down. Right now it feels strong, right now it might feel good. Fight against the urge to put your thumb there. Your thumb needs to be behind the neck, and oftentimes it's kind of right across from the second finger or maybe between the first and second finger. Get used to that feeling. It's okay to bend it a little bit. A lot of guys tend to stay up on the tip like that. I'm a little more casual about it. I might tend to bend the thumb a little bit, but that keeps your hand rounded in a cup like this, which allows you to get the piston motion from the fingers. Acoustic bass players, as opposed to electric bass players, as a general rule, although not always, people are starting to break this rule regularly. If you play a note with your first finger, and then your second finger, a half step up, the next half step up on electric bass, you would use your third finger. On acoustic bass, we support the third note with two fingers. So it's one half step higher, your second finger, one half step higher, both your third and fourth fingers together. So you get used to playing those as almost one clump of fingers, if that makes sense. That helps to support the slightly higher string height we have on acoustic basses. If you have a particularly fast passage and you can make it comfortably and in tune and in time with your pinky, it's becoming more and more acceptable to do that and not to worry about supporting it. The other thing is it's very cool to support the higher fingers, such as the pinky and the third finger, with the other fingers being down. Sometimes it's hard to get them all down, but in general, that's a perfectly acceptable thing to do. So you have more than one finger pressing down the string at a certain point. Your right hand. A lot of electric bass players that have switched over to acoustic will tend to play acoustic like this. Now, I'm not sure if you can tell the difference from your vantage point watching this video, but the real key here is to use more of the meat of the finger, this portion of the finger right here, and we're not only plucking the string, but we're trying to get the string, just go with this visual for a second, you're trying to get the string to go in a circular motion instead of in a back and forth motion. So you almost kind of finesse the string around. A good friend of mine told me this. Marshall Hawkins taught me this, and it applies to electric bass as well. I get a much better tone on electric thinking this concept. Now I'm being a little more obvious with it so you can see it, but you're almost finessing that string around. But can you hear the difference between this? of the finger hitting the string is what's supposed to happen. It's that warm sound that gets all the tone from the bass to be generated. We as bass players at faster tempos and at louder volumes tend to want to dig in harder on the bass. There's a point where too much is not good. For instance, I'm going to play a couple of notes here, and I'm going to play them too hard, and you'll hear how the sound is almost squashed and with less tone. Here you go. Here's an example. Hear how the tone is squashed? It's not rich. It's not warm. It's not singing. What we're trying to do is find that sweet spot where the bass responds to the amount of volume you're playing with the dynamics you're playing with. And if you just sort of find that, let it be fat. Now if I play almost that same thing but hard, hear how the tone goes away? Try to avoid playing that hard. Do you ever see acoustic bass players just reach and grab a note up higher on the bass, but they don't even look and they know where they're going and they get the pitch dead on? You know how they do that? It's kind of a trick. This crook in the back of the neck, if you get your thumb to land at that crook, most basses are a D on the G string, right? So here's your open G. Come up here and you hit the crook, there's your D. Right? Some basses are an E flat, so you'll have to check your bass, but it's either going to be D or E flat. It's rare. It's more rare for the E flats. So if you can play in position down here on the acoustic bass, but you need to grab a note, your thumb will slide, and you have your D, E, all in this position right here. So use that trick. If you're an electric bass player and you have a favorite funk lick, start to learn how to play that on the acoustic bass. It's a very musical and fun way to build chops, technique in your fingers on the acoustic bass. And here's a classic example. I'm going to take a lick that I've known for a long time in E. And I'm going to include dead notes, which is just, and I'll talk more about this in the performance section. I'm going to use some hammer-ons, where you pluck the note once, and hammer on for the next note, and pull-offs. Pluck it once and pull off. So here's a little pattern for you. And it was supposed to be done with a thumb. So it was a funk, it was slap and pop, but I'm going to go ahead and do it on the acoustic bass with the fingers. Fun way to start to build fluidity in your fingers and smoothness of motion and to get more active on the bass.